Electronic warfare is the invisible dimension of modern combat. A war fought not with bullets and shells, but with radio waves, frequencies, and the electromagnetic spectrum that carries every command, every report, every drone feed, and every phone call that keeps a modern army functioning. When electronic warfare works, it is silent, unseen, and devastating, capable of paralyzing an entire formation without a single physical weapon being fired. When it is turned against you by your own equipment, captured and repurposed by the enemy, the results are not just devastating, they are surreal. Days ago, on the Eastern Front, Ukrainian forces demonstrated what happens when Russia's own electronic warfare technology is turned against the army that built it. And the result was one of the most extraordinary incidents of the entire war. Two Russian companies, approximately 200 soldiers total, shot each other in the dark for 40 minutes because a captured Russian jamming system had severed their communications at the worst possible moment. Not a single Ukrainian bullet was fired. Every casualty was inflicted by Russians on Russians. The capture. The R-330Zh Zhatel is one of the most capable electronic warfare systems in the Russian military's inventory. Designed to suppress mobile telephone networks, satellite communications, and radio data links across a radius of up to 20 kilometers, it is a truck-mounted system that consists of a powerful broadband jammer, directional antennas, signal analysis equipment, and a crew of 4 to 6 trained operators. The system costs approximately $10 million and represents years of Russian investment in electronic warfare technology, a field in which Russia has historically been considered a world leader. Ukrainian forces captured a Zhitel system approximately 3 weeks before the events described in this account. The circumstances of the capture were themselves remarkable. A Ukrainian special operations team raided a Russian electronic warfare position during a nighttime operation, overwhelming the security detail and seizing the system before its crew could activate the self-destruct procedures that are supposed to prevent sensitive equipment from falling into enemy hands. The crew, 4 Russian EW specialists, were captured along with the system, and their subsequent interrogation provided Ukrainian engineers with the operational passwords, configuration procedures, and technical documentation needed to operate the equipment. Ukrainian electronic warfare engineers, many of them civilians from Ukraine's pre-war technology sector, who had been mobilized for their expertise in radio engineering, signal processing, and software development, spent approximately 1 week examining, testing, and reconfiguring the captured Zhatel. The system had sustained minor damage during the raid, a bullet hole in the antenna housing, a cracked display panel, but its core electronics were intact. The engineers repaired the physical damage, verified the system's functionality through controlled tests at a rear area facility, and reprogrammed its targeting parameters to focus on the specific frequencies used by Russian military communications in the sector where the system would be deployed. The critical modification was the frequency targeting. The Zhitel was originally configured to jam Ukrainian and NATO communications frequencies. Ukrainian engineers reversed this configuration, programming the system to jam the specific Russian military radio frequencies that Ukrainian signals intelligence had identified through months of monitoring. The tactical command nets used by Russian battalion and company commanders, the logistics coordination frequencies, the artillery fire direction nets, and the encrypted digital channels used for drone control and targeting data. The system was now a Russian weapon aimed at Russian communications, an electronic warfare Trojan horse that would attack its creators with the tools they had built. The plan: Ukrainian intelligence identified the opportunity through careful monitoring of Russian unit rotation patterns in the eastern sector. Russian frontline units rotated regularly, typically every 2 to 4 weeks, with one company moving into positions as the relieved company moved out. These rotations were conducted at night, usually between 22 Re and 02 as shown, to reduce vulnerability to Ukrainian observation and fire. The rotation process was complex and required continuous radio communication between the incoming unit, the outgoing unit, and the battalion headquarters that coordinated the handover. Communication that ensured the incoming soldiers knew which positions to occupy, which sectors to cover, where the minefields were, and which routes were safe. If that communication was severed during the rotation, If the incoming and outgoing companies suddenly could not talk to each other, could not talk to their battalion headquarters, and could not verify each other's identity, the result would be chaos. Two armed groups of soldiers moving through the same positions in the dark, unable to communicate, unable to confirm who was friendly and who was hostile. In the paranoid, high-stress environment of the front line, where every shadow could be an enemy, where Ukrainian assault teams regularly probed Russian positions at night, and where soldiers had been trained to shoot first and verify later, the absence of communication would almost certainly lead to the most catastrophic of military disasters. Friendly fire. Ukrainian planners identified a specific Russian rotation scheduled for a night in late February. A company from the 27th Motorized Rifle Brigade moving in to relieve a company from the same brigade that had been on the line for 3 weeks. The rotation would involve approximately 100 soldiers moving in each direction through a network of trenches and communication paths that connected the rear staging area to the frontline positions. The timing, the route, and the approximate schedule had been determined through signals intelligence monitoring and drone surveillance of previous rotations. The captured Zhitel was moved into position approximately 8 kilometers behind the Ukrainian front line, close enough that its 20-kilometer jamming radius would cover the entire Russian sector where the rotation would occur. Far enough back that Russian counter-EW systems would have difficulty locating and targeting it. The night. The rotation began at approximately 22:30. Ukrainian signals intelligence monitored Russian communications as the incoming company departed its staging area and began moving toward the front. The outgoing company in the trenches was preparing to hand over its positions. Soldiers packing personal gear, NCOs briefing the incoming squad leaders on sector-specific details, the company commander coordinating the timing with battalion headquarters over the tactical radio net. At 23:07, the Ukrainian EW team activated the Zhatel. The effect was instantaneous and total. Every Russian radio on the targeted frequencies within a 20-kilometer radius went dead simultaneously. Tactical radios that had been carrying the routine traffic of a unit rotation, position reports, movement updates, coordination calls, suddenly produced nothing but a wall of electronic noise. Digital encrypted channels that had been carrying data, drone feeds, text messages between commanders, GPS-based position reports, collapsed into garbled nonsense. Mobile phones, which Russian soldiers used despite regulations prohibiting them, lost their cellular and satellite connections as the Zhatel's broadband jamming overwhelmed the commercial frequencies. The silence was absolute and terrifying. Within seconds, every Russian soldier involved in the rotation, from the company commanders coordinating the handover to the individual squad leaders guiding their men through dark trenches, lost the ability to communicate with anyone outside shouting distance. In the trenches and communication paths between the front and the rear, approximately 200 soldiers were suddenly isolated in the dark, unable to verify who was around the next corner, unable to confirm that the footsteps approaching through the mud were friendly. The shooting. The first shots were fired at approximately 23:12, 5 minutes after the jamming began. The location was a communication trench approximately 300 meters behind the main frontline positions, where soldiers from the incoming company, moving forward through the dark, encountered soldiers from the outgoing company moving rearward. Under normal circumstances, this encounter would have been coordinated by radio. Both companies would know exactly when and where they would pass each other, and squad leaders would have confirmed identities before the groups met. Without radio, the encounter was unannounced, unexpected, and, in the stress of sudden communications loss, interpreted by both sides as a possible enemy incursion. The incoming company's point man, a private 20 years old, 3 months at the front, nerves already raw from the sudden silence of the radios, saw shapes moving toward him in the dark trench and shouted a challenge. The response came in Russian, but in the noise, the mud, the stress, and the darkness, he didn't process the words. He heard a voice, saw a movement, and pulled the trigger. His squad, hearing their point man fire, opened up. The outgoing soldiers, suddenly taking fire from what they believed was an enemy assault team that had infiltrated their trench, fired back. The firefight spread with the speed of panic. Soldiers who heard shooting ahead of them in the trench assumed the position was under attack and moved forward to reinforce, running into a chaotic, point-blank battle where both sides were shooting at each other from distances of 5 to 30 meters. Grenades were thrown in the confined space of the trenches, their detonations killing and wounding soldiers from both companies indiscriminately. Machine guns opened fire from fighting positions, their operators shooting at muzzle flashes that belonged to their own comrades. The chaos was compounded by the complete absence of communication. No one could radio for a ceasefire. No one could contact battalion headquarters to report what was happening. No one could verify whether the people shooting at them were Ukrainians or Russians. In the dark, in the mud, in the narrow trenches where visibility was measured in meters, the only information available was the sound of gunfire and the muzzle flashes of weapons that could belong to either side. Ukrainian drone operators monitoring the Russian positions through thermal cameras watched the unfolding disaster with a mixture of professional satisfaction and human disbelief. The thermal imagery showed dozens of heat signatures, Russian soldiers firing at each other across a network of trenches with no Ukrainian forces anywhere in the area. The drone footage, which was recorded and later analyzed in detail, shows the distinctive pattern of a friendly fire engagement. No clear front line, no organized direction of fire, clusters of soldiers shooting in multiple directions, and the gradual, horrible realization spreading through the formation as individuals began to understand what was happening. The shooting lasted approximately 40 minutes. The ceasefire, the friendly fire, was eventually stopped, not by radio communication, which remained jammed, but by physical intervention. A Russian lieutenant from the incoming company, who had taken cover when the shooting began and had spent several minutes trying and failing to raise anyone on his radio, made a decision that required extraordinary personal courage. He stood up in the trench, removed his helmet to make himself more visible, and walked toward the heaviest firing while screaming at the top of his lungs, in Russian, repeatedly, with every profanity available to the language, that everyone was shooting at friendlies and needed to stop immediately. He was nearly shot twice, rounds cracking past him from both directions as panicked soldiers fired at the figure moving in the dark. But his voice, continuous, furious, unmistakably Russian, unmistakably authoritative, gradually penetrated the chaos. Soldiers near him stopped firing. They repeated his ceasefire order to the men around them. The shooting decreased in intensity, sputtered, and finally stopped at approximately 23:50, 43 minutes after the first shot. The lieutenant then organized a head count. What he found in the trenches was the aftermath of a battle that should never have happened. Damage assessment. Russian soldiers killed by friendly fire, estimated 8 to 12. The dead included soldiers from both companies. Men killed by bullets and grenade fragments fired by their own comrades in a battle where both sides believed they were fighting Ukrainians. Russian soldiers wounded by friendly fire, estimated 12 to 18. Wounds ranged from minor shrapnel injuries to gunshot wounds requiring immediate surgical evacuation. Several soldiers suffered severe blast injuries from grenades thrown in the confined trench spaces, the same type of injuries that Ukrainian grenades would cause, inflicted instead by Russian grenades on Russian soldiers. Total Russian casualties from the incident: approximately 20-30 killed and wounded. Ammunition expended. Russian soldiers fired hundreds of rounds of small arms ammunition through an estimated 8 to 12 grenades and fired multiple RPG rockets within the trench system, all at each other. The ammunition expenditure, while modest in cost, represented supplies that would need to be replaced from the already strained logistics pipeline. Equipment damaged. Several weapons damaged or destroyed in the fighting. Radio equipment, already inoperative due to jamming, was further damaged by blast effects and shrapnel. Sections of the trench system were damaged by grenade explosions, requiring engineering work to restore. The rotation itself was aborted. The incoming company, having lost soldiers to friendly fire before even reaching its assigned positions, was pulled back to the staging area. The outgoing company, equally shocked and depleted, was ordered to remain in position until a new rotation could be organized, extending their frontline deployment by days. Cost analysis. Ukrainian expenditure. Fuel for the generator powering the captured Zhitel system during the approximately 1-hour jamming operation, approximately $20 $30. Total ammunition and weapons expended by Ukraine, 0. Total Ukrainian casualties, 0. Russian losses, 20-30 soldiers killed and wounded, at an estimated personnel cost of $50,000, $100,000 per soldier, $1 to $3 million. Ammunition expended, approximately $15,000, $30,000. Equipment damaged, approximately $50,000, $100,000. Morale and unit cohesion damage to 2 companies. Immeasurable but severe. Total estimated Russian losses, 1 million. Return on investment, effectively infinite. Ukraine achieved significant Russian casualties without expending any lethal resources whatsoever. The aftermath. Intercepted Russian communications in the days following the incident revealed a formation in crisis. The battalion commander who had coordinated the rotation was relieved of his command, held responsible for the disaster despite the fact that his communications had been jammed by a system he could not have anticipated. Officers at division level ordered an immediate investigation into how 2 companies from the same brigade had engaged each other. The investigation concluded that enemy electronic warfare disruption of tactical communications during a critical movement phase had caused the incident. A technically accurate assessment that omitted the detail that the EW system used was Russia's own Zhitel, captured and turned against them. Trust between the 2 companies, which would need to cooperate in future operations, was shattered. Soldiers who had been shot at by their own comrades harbored resentment, suspicion, and fear that manifested in reduced cooperation, reluctance to conduct night movements, and a pervasive paranoia that the next rotation might produce another catastrophe. The battalion's combat effectiveness, already degraded by the casualties, was further undermined by the psychological damage that friendly fire inflicts on a unit's cohesion and morale. The broader impact spread beyond the immediate formation. Russian units across the sector were briefed on the incident, told that Ukrainian EW could disrupt communications severely enough to cause friendly fire, and warned to implement backup identification procedures for night rotations. These procedures, physical recognition signals, predetermined challenge and response codes, designated meeting points where units would link up before moving through each other's positions, added complexity and time to every rotation, slowing the process and creating additional vulnerabilities that Ukrainian intelligence immediately began studying for future exploitation. Strategic implications. The capture and combat deployment of the R-330Zh Zhitel represents a new and deeply unsettling dimension in the electronic warfare contest that has been a defining feature of this war from its first day. Ukraine has demonstrated that it can not only defend against Russian EW systems, jamming them, avoiding their effects, and working around their coverage, but capture them intact, reverse engineer their capabilities with speed that reflects Ukraine's deep bench of civilian engineering talent, and deploy them offensively against the very forces they were designed to protect. The captured Zhitel, a $10 million system that Russian engineers spent years developing, that Russian factories spent months manufacturing, and that Russian EW specialists spent weeks configuring for operations in this specific sector, now jams Russian communications with the same power, the same precision, and the same devastating effectiveness that its designers intended it to have against Ukrainian targets. It is operated by Ukrainian specialists who, thanks to the captured crew's interrogation and the system's documentation, understand its capabilities every bit as well as its original Russian operators did. They know its range, its frequency coverage, its power output, and its optimal configuration for maximum disruption. They know because the system told them exactly how to use it to inflict maximum damage on the army that built it. The psychological dimension of this weapon, turning an enemy's own technology against him, amplifies the physical effects far beyond what the casualty numbers alone suggest. Russian EW specialists who learn that a Zhatel has been captured and redeployed will question the security of every EW system in the Russian inventory. If one Zhatel can be captured and turned, any Zhatel can, any Krasuka can, any Pol 21 can. The possibility, however remote, that the enemy might be operating your own equipment against you introduces a corrosive uncertainty into every level of Russian electronic warfare operations. Can we trust our own jamming? Could our own system be jamming us? Is the EW support we're receiving actually protecting us? Or is it a captured system creating the conditions for our destruction? This uncertainty has practical consequences. Russian commanders who suspect that Ukrainian forces may possess captured EW systems will demand additional authentication procedures for electronic warfare coordination. Procedures that slow response times and reduce the flexibility that EW operations depend on. Russian EW units may be ordered to implement more robust self-destruct mechanisms for their equipment, mechanisms that add complexity, increase the risk of accidental destruction, and consume engineering resources that are needed for maintenance and repair. The entire Russian EW enterprise, one of the few areas where Russia entered this war with a genuine technological advantage, is subtly but meaningfully degraded by the knowledge that its own tools can be turned into weapons against it. The friendly fire incident itself, 20 to 30 Russian soldiers killed and wounded by their own comrades, joins a growing catalog of disasters that have been caused by Ukrainian electronic warfare and intelligence operations exploiting the internal weaknesses of the Russian military. The defector who betrayed his formation's positions, the Orlan 10 that was captured and flown over Russian lines, the Lancet that was hijacked and sent back to kill Russian officers, and now 2 Russian companies that shot each other in the dark because a Russian jamming system operated by Ukrainians silenced their radios at the worst possible moment. Each of these incidents individually is damaging. Collectively, they create an atmosphere of institutional paranoia that erodes the trust, cohesion, and confidence that any military needs to function effectively. Russian soldiers who cannot trust their drones, their communications, their electronic warfare systems, or even the identity of the soldiers in the next trench are soldiers whose combat effectiveness is fundamentally compromised, not by firepower, but by doubt. Since February 2022, Russia has lost approximately 249,000 soldiers killed and wounded, over 1,160 tanks, nearly 24,000 armored vehicles. And now on a dark night in eastern Ukraine, approximately 20 to 30 of those casualties were inflicted not by Ukrainian weapons, but by Russian weapons, fired by Russian soldiers at Russian soldiers, triggered by a Russian electronic warfare system that now serves Ukraine. The mathematics of this engagement are unlike anything else in the war. 0 Ukrainian ammunition expended, 0 Ukrainian casualties taken, 20 to 30 Russian casualties inflicted. Not by Ukrainian firepower, but by Ukrainian intelligence, Ukrainian engineering, and the exploitation of Russian vulnerability. The next time Russian communications go silent during a rotation, every soldier in the trench will wonder, is this a technical malfunction? Is this routine interference? Or is this the prelude to another nightmare? Another 40 minutes of shooting at shadows that turn out to be their own comrades. Another morning spent counting bodies that fell to friendly fire. Another investigation that concludes with an officer relieved of command and a formation too traumatized to fight. Ukraine didn't fire a single bullet that night. Ukraine didn't need to. The most devastating weapon on the battlefield was silence, and Ukraine owned it completely. Ukraine fights, Ukraine jams. Ukraine lets Russia destroy itself. This is Iron Front. The battlefield speaks louder than propaganda.